Before our service begins, I'll ask that you make sure that your cell phones are turned off. Our service begins with psalms and prayers from the Jewish tradition, linking Jacob's life with our 3,000-year-old tradition. Beginning with Psalm 121, Shir Ma'alot Esa Einai El Ha'arim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, Ezri Me'im Adonai Ose Shamayim Ba'aretz, Al Yitein Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanum Shomrecha, Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeitcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. Surely the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and coming, now and forever. The 23rd Psalm, Mizmor LeDavid Adonai ro'i lo echsal, b'neot deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yishalvev yantcheni b'ma'aglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit mavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi, shiftecha u'mish'antecha hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorrai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim. A psalm of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff do comfort me. You prepare a banquet before me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the book of Ben Sira, we read that all humans are destined to die, that we share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Cry for the dead, hide not your grief, do not restrain your mourning, but remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than constant sickness. Let us not seek to understand what is too difficult for us, nor search for what is hidden, nor be preoccupied with what is beyond, for we have been shown more than we can comprehend. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore are our days few in eternity. The good things in life last for a short time, but a good reputation endures forever. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mivorach. God has given, and God has taken away. May God's name be praised. With these time-honored words from the book of Job, Jewish mourners greet the news of the death of a loved one. And really, a few minutes ago, I stood with Andy, Lisa, and Lila as they uttered these most awful words in response to the death of their beloved Jacob. It was a painful, terrible moment. The words did not come easily. For with Jacob's death, we all feel that God has taken away someone very precious. Yet Jewish tradition requires that we speak of God's praise, and we try, even if the words get stuck in our throats, even if we feel full of doubt and anger at a God who could allow Jacob to die. We do as tradition bids us, even if at this moment nothing makes sense, even if pain and anger are all that we feel. Our tradition understood this, which is why it exempted the performance of any positive mitzvot in the wake of death. It understood the shock and the pain and the anger that a person might experience at such times, and said, let's put a hold on the religious theology for a bit. Tuesday night, when I received word that Jacob's death was imminent, I felt a desperate need to connect with him somehow. And I opened a Google Doc that Jacob had shared with me a little over a year ago when he was in 9th grade and preparing for confirmation here at Temple Bethel. And the email began, "Hi, Rabbi. I'm struggling to start my speech." It was due a couple days later, by the way. "Is there any chance you can write back with some way to start it so I can get it done by Sunday? Thanks, Jacob." So I then I searched the email a couple days later, and I found the link to the Google Doc for the finished product. And when I clicked on it, an extraordinary thing happened. It brought me to a completely different document, an assignment on summer reading that Jacob had written for Barak. How did that manage to happen? In a very characteristic Jacob sort of way, he reused the confirmation speech document, completely deleted it, right? To start a whole new document. And what I really quite innocently and unintentionally discovered there was simply extraordinary. The assignment was on a Kazuo Ishiguro novel that's entitled Clara and the Sun. It's a futuristic story that's narrated by an artificial robotic friend called Clara and her relationship with a teen, Josie, a young human, who is critically ill. And I actually, I kind of had this uneasy feeling like I was intruding into something that didn't really belong to me at all. And I spoke with Andy and Lisa, and I asked if I could read parts of what Jacob had written here today. It wasn't very long, by the way. It was like a page. And I'm quoting. This is Jacob. "As the story unfolds, the question arises, who embodies more humanity, and why? The emotional complexity of humans reveals the profound essence of their existence, quite different from the simpler programming of artificial friends." He continues and he writes, "Empathy is at the core of humanity. and the people in this novel display this naturally. Josie, Clara's human friend, shows genuine empathy by supporting her human best friend, Rick, through life's challenges. And he quotes from the book, "That's what friends are for, to help each other through difficult times." This emotional bond between individuals proves the authenticity of human feelings, writes Jacob. While the artificial friends are limited by their programmed responses, unable to fully grasp the nuances of human emotions, their complex emotions, genuine empathy, and willingness to embrace vulnerability set them apart from the artificial friends, providing insight into human nature. This prompts us to reflect on the significance of being human in a world filled with technology and artificial beings. Jacob got it right. Being human is to have feelings. It's what makes us unique and sets us apart from AI. And those feelings live on beyond the physical body. In a part of the book that Jacob did not quote, Josie's father asks Clara, this artificial friend, "Do you believe in the human heart?" I don't mean simply the organ, obviously. I'm speaking in the poetic sense, the human heart. Do you think there is such a thing? Something that makes us separate and individual? Clara, the artificial friend, responds to the father, saying, "The heart you speak of, it might indeed be the hardest part of Josie to learn. It might be like a house of many rooms. Stepping inside that room, you find rooms within rooms." I was struck by this metaphor that was used by Ishiguro of the human heart, a heart of many rooms, because it appears in rabbinic literature. We find that same metaphor used. It says in the Tosefta, "Make for yourself a heart of many rooms, and bring into it the words of Shammai and the words of Hillel." While our tradition uses that metaphor to teach the lesson of acceptance of a plurality of views, Ishiguro uses the metaphor to illustrate the complexity of human emotions. In the physical, outside world, there will be reminders of Jacob, rooms that we might find hard to enter. Make for yourself a heart of many rooms. Go inside and draw on those complex emotional rooms that comprise Jacob's heart and soul. They will be there forever. The humanity of what made Jacob who he was, deep inside his heart, will never be lost. His sense of caring for humans, for dogs, for underdogs, teams like the Cubbies, that is something that will never be lost and for which we can all aspire to. Our tradition sees light as a symbol of the soul, as suggested by the verse in Mishlei in Proverbs, "Ner Adonai nishmat Adam," the spirit or soul of a person is the lamp of God. As the flame is attached to the wick, so the soul is attached to the body. Jacob's flame burned very bright for a short period of time, but his flame illuminated the lives of all of you. God has surely taken away someone very valuable. And yet I suppose we've been given something as well. We've been given the experience of having known Jacob. Why could he not have been allowed to live out his rightful years of life? That's a question that we will never be able to answer. Life will never be the same without Jacob. The pain will never entirely be gone, but neither will those rooms in the heart, the loving memory of Jacob. He will live on there and in our lives. May God help us to find sources of comfort and help us to live up to his example, an example of an appreciation of life from which all of us have much to learn. Tehi nishmatot tzura b'tzora chayim, may his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. And let us say, Amen. We have a few speakers this morning. First, I'd like to call on Andy.
Jacob was a pain in the tuchus. His legendary stubbornness and laid-back tendencies were there from the very beginning of his life. He showed absolutely no signs of readiness to be born when his due date arrived. Lisa had to be induced, and after a long and arduous labor, he finally made his appearance shortly after 3 a.m. on the 24th of August, 2008, kicking and screaming. When we learned about Jacob's awful diagnosis at the end of February this year, one of my first thoughts was, he fought like hell to enter this world, but he's going to fight like hell not to leave it. And boy, did he fight. In these past 4 months, he endured too many indignities to list. And yet, through it all, he handled it with a stoicism that I bet many adults in his situation couldn't muster. He had every reason and right to complain, cry, and scream about his condition. But he rarely did. He just took things as they came, bravely, unquestioningly. I think what he was most vocally upset about was not being able to go on his thrill coaster tours trips this summer. Jacob was a very smart kid from an early age. He surprised his early childhood education teachers at the JCC with his mastery of letters and their sounds. Thank you, Leapfrog Letter Factory DVD. Lisa and I also read to him all the time. We read him countless bedtime stories every night, a ritual that he always enjoyed. And once he learned to read, he would read books to himself, to Lila, even to our dogs. Lisa and I were so proud of how we nurtured his love of reading, and we're certain that our impeccable early parenting was setting him up to excel academically. Oh, how wrong we were. The first signs of trouble began early in elementary school when Jacob solved a math word problem, writing down only the final answer without showing any of the steps required to get to that solution. He got the correct answer somehow, but the instructions for the math problem explicitly prompted the student to explain how they arrived at their answer. All he wrote down was, "I thunk it in my head." That was just a harbinger of things to come. He was smart enough to do well enough without working too hard. and astute enough to realize that about himself. I remember Lisa and I meeting with Jacob's fifth grade teacher, Mr. Haviland, at a parent-teacher conference. And Mr. H just laughed with us and threw his hands up in the air. There was no question that Jacob was a smart kid, a good kid, amiable and well-liked by his teachers and peers. He just didn't like to work that hard. On more than one occasion, he was caught playing an online chess game on his iPad with another classmate during a lesson. But Jacob's clever and charming ways ensured that he never got in too much trouble. He'd get lightly reprimanded and lay off the inappropriate activities for a while until he felt emboldened to try again. And not to dwell on this for too much longer, but this pattern continued through the rest of his school years. Surely, as the classes got harder and he couldn't just coast by anymore, he would reform his ways, we thought. But Jacob had other plans. Jacob was Jacob, proudly and stubbornly so. Through the rest of his time at Swain, and then at Barrack, and most recently Perkiomen, he was in all the honors and AP classes. And that's truly where he belonged, thanks to his strong aptitude and analytical mind. But he would rather be playing, socializing, or focusing on his own interests. It's just who he was. And even though he exasperated more than a few teachers, and even though we'd receive the occasional emails from them about missing assignments or subpar test scores, by the time their report cards came out, the same teachers wrote comments cavelling about how kind, considerate, funny, thoughtful, and collaborative he was. So some people are book smart and other people are street smart. Jacob was clearly embracing the latter. He was a budding entrepreneur, always looking for a new side hustle to earn money for himself in ways that incorporated his interests and talents. Last year, he discovered the website Redbubble, which allows creators to upload original designs that customers can have printed on merchandise. Jacob saw that some other creators were profiting off roller coaster logos and figured he could do the same. So he set up shop and waited for the royalty checks to come in. After a month or two, his sales took off. He managed to get one decent payout before his account was abruptly shut down. He tried to protest to Redbubble customer service, but they wouldn't reinstate his account. To this day, it's still unclear to me whether his account was suspended because they realized he was underage or because none of the images he uploaded were his own original works. It was probably both. But in any event, that was the end of that pursuit. Jacob was just starting to make a small business out of 3D printing and laser engraving. He learned how to do 3D printing in school and asked for a 3D printer to have at home. We were happy to nurture one of his interests, so we got him a starter one for his birthday last year. He would create anything from useful household items such as battery holders to fun sports-themed decorative items for his friends and cousins. After his cancer diagnosis, to help keep him busy and give his days some purpose, we got him a higher-end 3D printer to serve his first paying customers, Lisa's parents, who hired Jacob to 3D print items for their new home, such as tissue boxes. He also made them custom drink coasters by etching designs onto blank coasters with the laser engraver that he also owned. His first non-family paying customer was the Pediatric Cancer Foundation of the Lehigh Valley, who ordered a set of coasters with their logo on them, which they are now using in their new office. Jacob was 21 months older than Lila. He visited the hospital the day after she was born and was so excited to meet his baby sister. He had a little toy rattle for her that he couldn't wait to give her. He was so cute with her and so happy to be with all of us in the hospital. Then we brought her home, and his demeanor changed on a dime. We can pinpoint the precise moment that Lila's previously ecstatic big brother realized that he was now going to have to share the spotlight with her. "Put baby Wywood down," he demanded when Lisa was holding her. "Put her where? Put her down where?" she'd ask. "On the ground," he demanded, gesturing to the floor. But Jacob eventually mellowed out, and he came to love his little sister, or at least tolerate her, but mostly love, we think. And we know the feeling was mutual. Nevertheless, Jacob had clever ways to shine the spotlight back on himself. In a now infamous video that we have shared a couple times, and I'll share it again for those who haven't seen it. When Lila was 2 and Jacob was 4, Lila was dancing for the video camera in our family room, and out of nowhere, Jacob photobombed her, mockingly dancing his way into the frame behind her, with Lila completely unaware. When she finally noticed him and finished her dance, she gave him a big hug. But Jacob continued to mock her dancing, now with Lila's full awareness. "That's not right dancing. That's not right, Jacob," she protested. Jacob and Lila really were a great pair. They played together, watched the same children's programs together, and traveled well together. What else can I say? They were together a lot. Jacob gets all the glory for his roller coaster enthusiasm. But whenever we went to amusement parks or water parks as a family, Lila was sitting right by his side on all the same crazy rides. And Jacob was a great sport when Lila became more involved in competitive gymnastics and dance. He endured many long gymnastics meets, dance recitals, and nutcracker performances. He moaned and groaned about attending them as you would expect, but ultimately, he would sit in the stands or the audience and pay attention to her. We know that he was secretly proud of her accomplishments, even if he didn't want to show it. I've already noted in Jacob's obituary how he was such a caring, loyal friend to both man and beast. He inherited his love of dogs from Lisa, of course, but his own affection for them was truly his own and not just a mirror of his mother's. Of course, it helps that he never knew a day when we didn't have a dog in the house. Our first dog, Teddy, preceded Jacob and curiously sniffed him up and down the day we brought him home from the hospital. Jacob was a natural with dogs, the way he pet them, played with them, spoke to them, snuggled with them on the sofa or in bed. He had such a big heart for dogs. And that love carried through to helping other dogs by volunteering at and raising funds for local dog shelters, or siding with his mom when she wanted to foster more dogs despite my own protests. But as many folks know, I went from, "You can't foster 2 disabled puppies at the same time," to, "I love these floofy puppies," faster than you can blink. But Jacob's love of dogs was second only to his love of his friends and family. He innately understood the importance of family connections and eagerly participated in family gatherings and trips together. As he got older, it was delightful to see him effortlessly hang with Lisa's and my generation of aunts, uncles, and first cousins. Of course, he was also such a wonderful role model to his own first cousins, Ben and Abby. To quote the comedian Jim Gaffigan, cousins are like celebrities for little kids. In that vein, Jacob was on the A-list. And Jacob was so fortunate to have such a wonderful group of friends from all different walks of life. Jacob was well liked by so many of his peers. He led a bit of a double life. He could sometimes come across as an introverted, brooding teenager at home. But with his school and BBYO friends, he was outgoing, a goofball, and often the life of the party. Maybe a bit too much party at times during classes. He made a lasting impact on those who knew him. Although he left Barrack midway through 10th grade for another school, after his diagnosis, he received a huge stack of cards and letters from his former Barrack classmates with heartfelt notes of encouragement to get well soon. Jacob also embraced and was embraced by his Thrill Coaster Tours family. Lisa and I are only now starting to fully grasp the depth of his relationships with other TCT campers. These were his people. He kept up meaningful long-distance friendships with so many other TCT kids, and TCT trips were some of the happiest times of his life. Jacob had a quick wit, a good nature, and a natural ability to relate to different people and personalities. He was everybody's friend. These qualities would have carried him so far in life. I must give special mention to Jacob's friends from Swain. His class was tight-knit, and Jacob felt so at home there. When he had his bar mitzvah party at Dave & Buster's, he invited his entire Swain class, and everyone who was available showed up. He held court with all his friends and was in his element. In this case, he was legitimately the life of the party. And even though performing wasn't really his thing, he got a role in the school musical in 8th grade just so he could share that experience with his Swain friends and spend more time with them before graduation. And although what I'm about to say next will be difficult, as if it hasn't been already, I want to share something with all of Jacob's friends. In my final private moments with Jacob in the hospital on Wednesday, before we withdrew care, and after I had exhausted everything else that I wanted to tell him, I took his phone and read to him all of his unread messages. Even if I knew objectively that he couldn't hear them anymore, it felt like something that I needed to do to provide some closure for his friends and for me as well. But I was not prepared for the countless messages from so many friends, from Swain, Barrack, Thrill Coaster, BBYO, and beyond, that had just come through in the preceding 24 hours when news started to spread about his terminal condition. Friends were writing their goodbyes. Others had written in the preceding weeks and were just checking in with him and giving him life updates. I read every single unread message out loud to him, and every single one brought me to tears. The texts were eloquent, sincere, beautiful, and tragic. I hope that none of his friends are upset or embarrassed that I did this. I hope that they feel, as I do, that somehow, at least on some cosmic or spiritual level, Jacob heard their messages loud and clear. And in typical Jacob fashion, they will be lucky if they ever receive even the tersest of replies. He was always a man of few words, at least when it came to texting back. It is too easy to stand here and lament all the things Jacob never got to do before his completely unfair and untimely passing. He never got to drive a car or go off to college or have a girlfriend that we know of. We're also pretty sure a few girls liked him, but he was oblivious. But I hope that we can take comfort in the fact that he had a rich life full of adventures and experiences. He went on road trips to Chicago, attended more than a few Cubs games at Wrigley Field, but saw them win a little less of the time. Enjoyed vacations in Cape Cod, Maine, and Florida, to name a few. He cruised to Bermuda, the Caribbean, and even to Scandinavia, where he convinced us to spend one port day at an amusement park in Sweden. He even visited Southern California and saw the Pacific coast on one of his thrill coaster tours. He bravely scurried across the elements high above the ground at several treetop adventure courses, some of which I also had to endure because of his young age at the time. He got me and Lila on a jet ski in Sarasota. Again, I had no choice. He was too young to drive. And after some tentative practice in Sarasota Bay, I rewarded him and his sister with a full pedal-to-the-metal joyride, zooming up the Gulf of Mexico coastline. I rode lots of roller coasters with him, but he also encouraged me to join him on amusement park rides that I was terrified of, like a huge rotating pendulum swing, or a drop tower that points you face down at the top. And I not only tolerated those rides with him, but I loved them and rewrote them with him multiple times. Sharing those moments of exhilarating joy with Jacob was when our bond was the strongest, and I will cherish those memories forever. Lisa is not the thrill seeker she once was. Ironically, she blames being pregnant with Jacob for upsetting her equilibrium and making her too queasy to ride thrill rides anymore. Nevertheless, she was just as happy to be our amusement park Sherpa, sitting on a bench in the shade with our backpacks and water bottles, waiting for me, Jacob, and Lila to get off a ride. Jacob was always concerned about whether she was having any fun just sitting around all day. "I'm happy if you're happy," she would reply. And then he would smile and usher us to the next ride. The astonishing number of people who have joined us today is testament to how much Jacob meant to you and how much our family means to you. Jacob has left us way too soon, but his spirit and his light will live on in all of us. We can learn so much from how he approached life. There is, of course, the obvious message. Don't obsess about your work. Don't get bogged down in the drudgery of life, and instead give yourself plenty of time to do what you enjoy and makes you happy. But more important, he taught us to nurture our relationships, spend time with friends and family, be present for one another. Lisa and I have already felt that change in us. Casual Facebook friends are becoming real-life friends. We both have a strong yearning to get closer to our niece and nephew and other family and friends. We want to be more a part of your lives. This feeling has been returned to us as well, as relatives and friends have shared how they want to become closer to us, and especially to Lila. And finally, if I may borrow a line from the 1989 film Parenthood and offer an extended metaphor for Jacob's thrill-seeking nature, get off that boring, repetitive merry-go-round and go ride a roller coaster instead. Sure, the intense ups and downs, inversions, and unexpected turns may be terrifying, but the courage to embrace all of that instead of fighting against it is the mark of a life well lived. I'm glad that many of you heeded my suggestion to wear your jazziest sneakers to the funeral in honor of Jacob. I do not own such sneakers myself, so I am wearing one of Jacob's prized pairs. To my surprise, his feet grew to be a bit bigger than mine, and I think that's right. Because as I think about how to live the rest of my life in a way that honors Jacob and keeps his spirit alive, I have some pretty big shoes to fill.
One of the last memories I have, and I think I'll always have, of Jacob was there was a blood drive here, and in our workroom at one point, I saw Jacob with Joseph and with some friends over a screen watching baseball, and it was just such a typical type of snapshot that it's permanently imprinted. Joseph and Jacob were really inseparable. I mean, they were always together, and I'd like to call on his dear friend to say a few words.
Before I get started, I just want, you can all help me with this too. Make sure that there are no birds up here, because yesterday I was practicing my speech, and I'm convinced that Jacob sent a bird over to me, and in his own way, the bird pooped on me. And it got on my arm, and it got on my shirt, and I saw it on my arm, but I didn't notice that it was on my shirt, so I went inside to keep practicing, and I finished, and I looked, and it was still there. I don't think Jacob would send a bird to go pooping on any of his Cubs stuff, but just please be aware. So, yeah. And for those of you who do not know me, my name is Joseph Block, and I was Jacob's closest friend for the 15 great years that I had the honor of sharing with him. I know that funerals are often very challenging for people to attend, and I don't even like mentioning the word because of the memories it brings to me. However, I do find some very small sense of comfort at funerals, remembering all of the good times that I got to share with the person who has passed, and it brings me a small feeling of joy and a massive sorrow. That is what I would like to focus on today. Jacob and I were always super close, and as many people can attest to, wherever Tweedledee went, Tweedledum followed, for better or worse. My mom has reminded me that she and Jacob's mommy alternated which one of us was Tweedledee or Tweedledum, depending on what we were up to that day. Some of my favorite memories with Jacob are the ones where things went wrong. To give a recent example, soon after Jacob was diagnosed, he purchased a 3D printer, and holy smokes, that thing was incredible. Because he was weak from being in the hospital for a little while, he enrolled me, Tweedledum in this case, to help me put the machine together. When I tell you that I was scared to assist, I mean I was frightened. Jacob was always a very independent person and frequently refused his dad's help, which would often put me in an interesting situation. I was happy to help Jacob, but the pressure was on because if we screwed up, I knew that his dad would not be thrilled at all with either of us. I know a little bit about technology and basic troubleshooting, but not the first thing about how to put together a top-of-the-line 3D printer without blowing the house up. Jacob had the confidence and trust in me to help him and prove to his dad who's the boss around the house. Everything went great until it didn't. I managed to put the entire thing together with Jacob's guidance. He would tell me what to do, and I would follow exactly what he told me. But the very last step, I messed up. I jammed one of the spots for the filament to go through in order to get to the inside of the machine. By now, you can imagine, correctly, that I was freaking out. Thank God that his dad was able to come to the rescue, but it just shows the shenanigans that we would get up to on any given day. Even with this happening, Jacob and I still had a great time putting together the printer, and it is a memory that I will cherish forever. Of course, whenever the story was brought up, he did not bat an eye to make sure that everybody knew that it was me who almost messed it all up. This really shows Jacob's cheerful and playful demeanor that was still present even after he had received the worst news of his life. He was always there to turn a tough situation into something fun and make a memory with people that sticks with them. Another thing Jacob and I bonded over was our competitiveness in everything. Whether it was hockey, ping pong, baking, Minecrafting, or anything else, we both tried to always be at our best. During COVID, I really started to get into hockey, and I also got some nets, sticks, and hockey balls to use when friends come over. When I went outside to get some exercise in, I would normally turn to hockey to work on some tricks and skills that I had seen on TV. When I invited Jacob over, hockey was always one of the first things that we would do. Even with my practice and knowledge of the sport, Jacob's competitiveness always got the better of me. I watched and learned how to play hockey, and Jacob watched and learned how to play me. He knew that when he hit the ball with all of his force, I would always get out of the way, opening the net right up for him to score with ease. Otherwise, he would have put me in the hospital, because he was strong when it came to the hockey. I tried to be pretty and thoughtful with my technique, but Jacob went out there and he got the job done. The same thing can also be said with everything else that we would do. Many times, I would learn how to do what we were doing in the best way, but Jacob knew how to find and exploit my weak spots. The many times he would beat me, even in basketball, where, as you all know, I'm a little bit closer to the net than he was, but it made us both so happy, and we just enjoyed the time that we got to spend together. These are times that I will always remember, and even though he isn't able to partake in these activities anymore, his spirit will always be in me and will always keep me sharp and on my toes. The hardest part about all of this for me is accepting that many life experiences that people take as a given, Jacob will not be able to experience. It is so hard to accept, but it is true. However, I do find comfort in thinking about all of the things that Jacob got to do with so many people that many people will never have the opportunity to experience, like going to Chicago with me to watch his beloved Cubs play, riding roller coasters across the country, or spending time with his Grammy and buddy in Florida. I also think that I can help with some of the experiences that he would enjoy for both of us. We planned for a long time to go to Citizens Bank Park in 2026 when the MLB All-Star Game would be held in Philadelphia. Although he won't be there with me, we will still experience it together because a part of Jacob will always be a part of me. As you know from before, Jacob, and I for that matter, always enjoyed poking fun at each other's mistakes. We also enjoyed blaming each other, and I still stand by the fact that I did not put the butter in the microwave for 20 minutes instead of 20 seconds. Wasn't me. To avoid any mistakes that Jacob would be teasing me about, I made sure to proofread my eulogy. Now, I can promise that Jacob would not have bothered to do the same, but as I was doing this, I realized that in these two small memories that I chose to share, I learned two valuable lessons. When thinking about it, there are so many instances where hanging out with Jacob that in his own way, he taught me a lesson that I will sometimes use for this point in my life and sometimes forever. As I close my remarks out, I want all of you to think of a special memory that you have with Jacob. When remembering, try and find a lesson that he may have been trying to teach you, and it is possible that you may never have realized. It doesn't have to be right now, or even today, but I think that not only will recalling these special times with Jacob help to keep him more alive in our hearts, but it can also give us a lesson to think about that will help us one day in the future. These are hard times for all of us, but sometimes thinking of something so small, like playing hockey with Jacob, can fill our hearts more than anyone can imagine. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on Wendy and Ross Bourne.
I have to lower these a little bit for me after Joseph. Jacob was the ultimate Cubs fan and has me to thank for that, or to blame for that. Being a Cubs fan is not much of a badge of honor and can be quite difficult and frustrating. From an early age, I took Jacob to Cubs games at Wrigley Field. He had beginner's luck because the Cubs won the first 3 games we attended. It was mostly downhill after that. Our final Cubs games together were memorable because we attended with Jacob's best friend and one of the most wonderful teenagers I have ever known, Joseph. Jacob had done meticulous research on where to sit so that we could catch foul balls. He chose just the right section for that. When we arrived at our seats, the usher took one look at petite, fragile, and elderly me and said, "Are you sure these are your seats?" He warned me we must be vigilant because hard-hit foul balls are likely to come flying towards us. We looked at him and thought, yeah, that's the idea. All of us were on the edge of our seats for the entire game. Jacob and Joseph, because they were hoping for a souvenir, and me, because I didn't want to get hit. Of course, no balls came our way, and the Cubs lost. We still loved every minute. That's what being a Cubs fan is all about. Even when I visited Jacob during his last few days in the hospital, I made sure to tell him the Cubs score and a highlight or lowlight of the latest game. Lisa and Andy played Jacob the Go Cubs Go song every time they won. Like I said, he was the ultimate fan. Jacob's love of the Cubs widened into a love for everything in the Chicago area, from Northwestern University to Chicago-style pizza and Walker Brothers apple pancakes, to close relationships with my Chicago area childhood friends and relatives. It even led Jacob to attempt to love the Chicago Bears. It's hard to be a Cubs fan, but it's really hard to be a Bears fan. Sorry for that, Jacob. Jacob adored playing board games. Engaging in group games like Clue and Telestrations at family gatherings was a highlight for all of us. Jacob was quite good at being the first player to figure out that the Clue murderer was Professor Plum with the candlestick in the conservatory. He loved playing chess and checkers with his beloved grandfather Ross, who he called Buddy. Jacob took his games on the road with me when I visited people who needed company and couldn't get out much on their own. They loved seeing him, and he genuinely enjoyed being with each of them. When playing Monopoly, Jacob showed that he liked the good things in life by aggressively seeking to purchase Park Place and Boardwalk. To Jacob, Mediterranean Avenue was certainly not worth buying, and he even thumbed his nose at Pacific Avenue, which was in the higher rent district. That strategy often backfired, but Jacob wanted only the best. I always felt like Jacob and I understood one another. Often, when we were together in a group setting, we would both glance at each other at the same time. We could tell we were feeling or thinking the same thing. It didn't have to be expressed. We understood each other, which was a rare and a special bond. A number of people, including his Aunt Amy, Aunt Robin, and Aunt Nancy, have said, sorry, it's not Aunt Amy, that Jacob was one of the sweetest teenagers they have ever known. He was as gentle, kind, and loving with his cousins Abby and Ben as he was with all 4 of his grandparents, and he was an amazing big brother to Lila. Being his grandmother was one of the best roles I have ever had. I will miss my grandson, my fellow Cubs partner, my dear friend, so very much.
I will remember. I will remember the night you were born, Jacob, almost 16 years ago, and it was a boy. Being surrounded by a sister and my wife and 2 daughters, it was a big day for me. Your birth at our home filled with emotion, but I couldn't look. When your parents asked if I was okay being named Grandpops, I said, sure. Well, that lasted until you spoke your early words. You called me Buddy, likely due to my calling you my little buddy. Fast forward 10 years and how your face lit up when I showed you my new car license plate, One Buddy. I will remember when you were a toddler. We would snuggle at bedtime talking. And I would tell you that you were my favorite grandson. You would then remind me that I was his only grandson. Well, that started a tradition of my saying to each of our grandchildren, you are my favorite, and then I would add the age and the gender. I will remember how you loved to travel. Grammy and I took you on a 3-day trip for your kindergarten graduation and had so much fun, we made it an annual tradition. New York, DC, Atlanta, Charleston, Chicago, Gettysburg. And I will remember the annual extended family vacations to Maine, Cape Cod, Vermont, Massachusetts, the Midwest, when you so enjoyed spending time with your cousins. I will remember how you especially enjoyed spending time in Longboat Key with Grammy and me. Those early years on Longboat, we loved walking on the beach, reading license plates in the parking lot, using the stair tower as an echo chamber, swinging from a banyan tree, kicking stones along the pathway, and I saved those stones and I showed them to you last year. Going out for custard, playing mini golf, boy did we have fun. We went to Cape Cod when you were 4, and I remember it was a long car ride, and you had a music player with lots of kids' songs, so you played the Gummy Bear song over and over. And finally, Grammy and I asked you to find another song. You nodded, and then with an impish grin, continued to play it again and again. Yes, that was you. You know what you wanted, and you knew how to make us laugh. I remember when during one of our road trips, we went to a Starbucks, and you got your first Frappuccino. Well, you drank it a little too fast, a little bit of brain freeze there. Several weeks later, you and I went to a Starbucks, and this time hung out for an hour, slowly sipping our drinks and just talked. I remember when you were 7, going to Rodale Park one sunny Saturday afternoon, taking a walk, lying on a blanket, looking at the clouds, then hearing voices from the velodrome. You were curious, so we walked over, watched some bike races, and it turned out that you were interested enough in biking that I asked if you wanted a bike. Well, that afternoon, you got a new bike, and your bike riding adventures began. And I have fond memories of us riding on the Ironton Rail Trail, stopping occasionally at a bench for snacks, juice, and some book reading. I remember how tech-savvy you were. You had 2 3D printers, plus an engraver, producing beautiful and creative pieces, and recently started your own business. And I think Grammy and I were your best customer. You flew drones, flying over your neighborhood, over the beach and longboat, taking beautiful sunset pictures, and piloting your drone within our new home while under construction. And how you made yourself available at all times to help me with my computers, laptops, phones, with great skill and patience, explaining what you were doing so I could hopefully do it myself. Even when you were ill, you helped me resolve some issues with ease. I remember you always looking for ways to make others feel good. One example, I remember making you a grilled cheese sandwich. It was a favorite food of yours, and you telling me I made the best. Then I heard similar comments to others for what they had done. I remember how you love games, cards, Monopoly, regular, then the Cheaters edition. Yep, you won most of the time. Master Clue, yep, you won most of the time. Scrabble, we used a lazy Susan to hold the board which had belonged to your great-great-grandmother, and you had a special place for that in our house. Yep, you won most of the time. Poker, you were going to teach me this summer. Chess. You started playing when you were 5 and learned the moves. Well, when you were 7, one day we were playing, and during the moves, you just blurted out, "Oh, I see what you are doing, and I see where you're going on your next move." And that was the beginning of your extraordinary chess playing. And with all these games, win or lose, you were always so gracious, always. I will remember how you loved baseball, and you've heard about that before, and was a huge Cubs fan, even more than Grammy. You collected so much Cubs swag, you ran out of wall, floor, shelf, and bed space in your room. And did you know your stats? And speaking of baseball, you were so excited to have been offered a job with the Iron Pigs this summer as a cashier, and that way you could watch all the games. You just never made it. I will remember how much you loved your dogs and how much they loved you. All were rescued, and you were inspired to spend time learning how to train service dogs and to volunteer with your mom at the shelter. We will all remember your love of roller coasters. Your love fest began with a mini cart that went down a track in your basement and turned into riding 265 different roller coasters in the US, Canada, and Europe. Not only did you ride them, but you knew many of the technical details of many of them, and you built an extensive collection of nano coasters. Importantly, you built wonderful and meaningful friendships at Thrill Coaster Camp. Let me add that you never teased me for avoiding riding a roller coaster. I chose the train instead. And as courageous as you were riding these coasters, I remember you sharing videos of your adventures on the ski slopes, self-taught, going down the double black diamond runs. I will remember you wanting to be so helpful with our house move last fall. You and Joseph loading many cartons into containers. And boy, did we work. And boy, did you work. I will remember how proud you were of being a Jew, continuing your Jewish education, post-bar mitzvah, helping out in the religious school, being confirmed, sharing this pulpit with your best friend Joseph, and talking about your project ideas for the BBYO when you became vice president of the local chapter. I will remember how when things went wrong, it didn't seem to faze you. You never complained. When you were sick this past 4.5 months, even when you were weak from your chemo treatments, you were determined to get out and do things. And as weak as you were during your initial treatments, you were determined to see every room on each floor of our new home, and you walked. I will remember your devotion to your wonderful parents and sister, your devotion to family, to your friends, and to your best friend Joseph, your devotion to your teachers, to your community, to this synagogue, to being a Jew. And speaking of devotion, I will remember seeing your devoted parents make sure you had the very best care possible during your courageous battle. And you know that they were by your side 24/7. Jacob, in your short life, it was so rich, so fulfilling with meaning. You meant so much to so many. Always remembered as kind, thoughtful, sweet, and caring. And you meant so much to me. After all, you were my favorite 15-year-old grandson. I will always remember you as my little buddy, so little buddy, I will miss you. And always love you.
Shortly, we'll recite the memorial prayer. It is very hot out. People shouldn't feel compelled to go to the cemetery, especially given the extreme heat, but there will be tents out there, enclosures and water available. You should know that if you're not going to the cemetery, in about an hour or so, we'll be back here for Sudat Havra'ah, the meal of consolation. It's very important. The Shiva period in Judaism is a time to share memories of Jacob with the family, and through those memories to bring some measure of consolation. We will have a minyan here this evening for services at 7. Following that, we will make space available in our building for teens if they feel a need to share what they're feeling and experiencing. We will have someone from Jewish Family Service that will facilitate that this evening. I ask that you rise for the memorial prayer. Rachamim shochein b'meromim hamitzeh menucha nechona tachat kanafei השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר רקיע מזהירים את נשמת יעקב שמואל בן אברהם ולאה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו אנא ברחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר Amen. We ask that the pallbearers step forward. If you are going on to the cemetery, we ask that you make sure your lights are turned on and your emergency signals are turned on as well.